Kym Illman, you started your small business in the spare bedroom of your flat in Perth in the late 80s. Today, that business is a multi-million-dollar international success. And you've recently launched Canity, an online training business. Can you tell me more about your early days?
I had a very entrepreneurial upbringing, I'm pretty sure of that. My parents both worked hard, and from the very early days, they drummed into me the value of work. My grandfather ran a tourist train in Victor Harbour. So on the weekends, I'd go down to Victor Harbour and in the school holidays, and I'd sell tickets at the age of 13. And I loved it. I loved it for the money was great. I got 20 cents an hour, but I also loved the social interaction. At 16, I got a job at David Jones. I was a weekend casual. Quite loved that too. Got to meet lots of people. And at 17, I got my first entree into business. I set up a mobile disco business, and I loved it. While my mates were out socialising, or watching telly at home, I was doing 2 to 3 nights a week DJing, as well as 40 hours a week at the bank. I didn't realise it then, but those early years provided me with a real opportunity to build a skill set that I would later rely on. And I think I never wanted to be average. I thought, let's work the long hours. I loved being creative, and I'm passionate about serving my clients. And these traits have been ingrained in me for years.
I've heard you've made a few mistakes along the way, like getting sacked at Channel 9.
Yeah, bit naughty. I probably deserved to be sacked, and quite frankly, I learnt a lesson there, and that lesson was don't take your income for granted. Look, I didn't love that job. To be honest, it never challenged me, and really it was just killing time out there, mucking around, quite frankly. And they really did me a favour, although at the time I didn't realise that. So I remember the first day after I got sacked, I thought, what am I going to do? I have no place to go. So I'll go down to Bunnings and I'll buy a whole lot of those peephole viewers that you drill into doors. I'm going to door knock and see if I can get some people to buy it. So I spent a whole day doing it, and I sold one. At the end of that day, I took all of the unsold stock back to Bunnings and decided that's not what I wanted to be. I didn't want to be an employee. I didn't want to go back to working on radio midnight to dawn in a city market, telling the time and reading the weather. That had no appeal to me. So what I did was, just before I got sacked, I went to England, and I was in the top shop there in a clothing store, and I was listening to their in-store radio. It was a DJ. And I thought, why don't I start a Jeans West radio or a Just Jeans radio? So I went to both of those entities and I said, hey, I can do your radio for you. I'm not going to do it live because I know you've got 120 stores, Jeans West. So I thought, let's do a cassette each week, 90 minutes. I can voice it, I can write it, I can produce it, I can mix it, I can send all the tapes out. And I went to Jeans West and Just Jeans, and Jeans West were based here in Perth where I lived, and they said yes. And I couldn't believe it. I've jagged this contract where I was earning as much for doing 1 day's work a week as I used to earn in 5 days. But then I thought, if I lose that contract, I'm back where I was when Channel 9 sacked me. So I was on the lookout for opportunities, and then one day, I was on hold at American Express, and I was listening to these recorded ads, and it hit me. I thought, I can do that. Once again, I can voice, I can mix, I can do the whole lot. So I decided I'm going to pursue that. And I went to the tax office. They were my first prospect, and straight away they signed up because they had on-hold times in the order of 40 minutes. And I thought, wow, this is great. Let's get another client and another client. Well, Messages on Hold was up and running in 1989. Today, we do languages, probably 10 or 15 different languages, productions in those languages. We have 11,000 sites that play our messages. We have 18 different countries with our productions playing in them. It's a multi-million-dollar business, and I've loved every minute of that journey.
So when you started Messages on Hold, were you forced into a sales role?
I was forced into every role. I was the perfect one-man band. I did the invoicing, the banking, the selling, the whole box and dice. But selling was paramount to me because I realised that I had to make the Messages on Hold side of the business the dominant side just to get around that problem. If Jeans West pulled the plug, I'd be in a lot of trouble. And in fact, they did pull the plug at some stage, but I'd managed to get my Messages on Hold business up to a comfortable level where it was always going to support me. And I wanted lots of small clients too. I didn't want to be in that precarious position of losing a super huge client.
So did you have any formal sales training?
No, nothing formal at all. In fact, when I left school, I did 3 months, I think, of accounting at a TAFE, and I thought, oh, I don't like that. So I decided, no, let's go into the workforce. But my sales training comprised of reading lots of books, speaking to lots of business people. And some of my clients were great because they saw that I was starting out and they liked what I was doing and they actually helped me out. Kym, you probably shouldn't say that next time or whatever. So it was very much trial and error, a slow process. And what I would do is I go to a meeting, and if I come back with a deal or a signed contract, I get excited, and then I work out what I did right. If I didn't come back with a deal, I'd work out what went wrong. So I'd do more of the things that were right and less of the things that were wrong. But I really needed a definite sales philosophy and a sales process. If I was going to grow the business, I had to have something formal because I didn't want people coming in, employing salespeople, and then having to go through what I went through, because it was a tedious, long process of working out what would work and what wouldn't, and I didn't want them losing interest early on.
So in terms of that process, did you end up writing things down, or how did you build it into a sort of a structure?
I'd make notes, and then at that point in the early days, I managed to get my first staff member, who I later married. She turned out to be one of my best staff members, and she had the organisational skills that would allow me to come back, and she'd grill me on what worked, and we'd always have this plan, and it would evolve. So what was good 2 years ago with technology perhaps changed. But it was a slow process that ended up becoming formalised.
So you're famous for your ambush marketing, but you put your success down to relationship selling. How do you explain that?
People buy from people they like. So I was always mindful that I had to establish a relationship with a client or a prospect before I could ask them to buy. So I needed to engage them. And I would use some other entrepreneurial ways to engage them. For instance, we would send out a card to a client, and it would be a cartoon. And the cartoon caption would be your name in it. Mm-hmm. You'd get that card, and you would show it to everyone in your office. Look, here's my name on this card. They were doing their marketing for me, God bless them. We'd send out magazine articles. For instance, if I was talking to Hertz about perhaps doing their on hold, and I saw an article about car rentals in Holland or whatever, I might send that to my contact. That person realises that I'm thinking about them, that I've done some research on them, and it just put me in much greater stead to be able to do business with them. But I did the things that most businesses don't want to do and perhaps are unable to do. And I think customers needed to like me. They needed to think I was a great guy, and my staff and my salespeople. They almost have to feel obligated. Hey, you've done so much for me, I can't possibly give the business to anyone else. And I think if you have a genuine interest in your clients, people will see that, and they'll be more likely to buy from you. And that's always been the focus. It's not business is business, business is relationships.
You talk a lot about, obviously, your relationships. When you've got staff members going out and building relationships for you, what do you tell them? What do you encourage them to do when they're building their own relationships?
Take interest in the client. Look around. If you're sitting in someone's office, look around, see a photo of their kids. Maybe there's a sports trophy, an Eagles poster, an Arsenal poster, and engage with them, because it's very hard. I do a fair bit of work with the local football club in Lancelin. And if somebody wants to sell me something, if they started talking about the Lancelin Pirates, there's nothing I could do but to be very impressed and be engaged with them. Then we go back to whatever there is trying to sell me.
Where do salespeople go wrong?
They talk too much. They will blurt out feature after feature, and they think the more that they talk, the greater chance they have of doing business. But they're sadly wrong. You've got to ask questions, and you have to listen, because if I'm asking a question and I'm getting information, I'm learning, and I can tailor how I'm selling to that person by what I've taken in. I think you've got to be very customer-centric. You've got to sit down and look at it from the customer's point of view. If I was selling cars, and let's say I saw the man's mobile phone on the counter and there was a picture of his two kids, well, I wouldn't be talking about how fast the car goes. I'd probably be talking about the safety aspects of it. Or, hey, do you think you might have to run kids around a football in years to come? So I've used that information. But unfortunately, many sales staff just get no training. They're out there floundering, and that's not their fault. They fail to qualify prospects. They spend too much time with the wrong people. They miss buying questions. They fail to ask for the sale. And you must be seen to be an expert, because if you're not, that person should never know more than you. And if you're not the expert, you're not going to sell, you're not going to enjoy your job, and you're probably going to leave. And that's a shame, because sales is a great profession.
Now, you mentioned buying questions. Can you give us an example of a buying question?
When can you deliver it? That's a buying question. Hey, if the screen breaks, how long before I can get it replaced? That's a buying question. These questions show that the prospect is committed. They're ready to buy. So it's a very important thing to actually recognise a question, but it's knowing what to do once you hear that question. That is the trick. For a start, you need to stop selling and start closing. Once again, it's all a matter of training. If you've got people out there and they don't know the basics, it's going to be very hard for them.
Why is someone's name so important in the sales process?
Well, Sophie, I have your full attention when I say Sophie, don't I?
Of course.
You get a little bit of a smile on your face there. People love hearing their own name. It's music to their ears. But salespeople don't use a client's name for a couple of reasons. They either are too lazy, and they know it, they don't realise how important it is and how impactful it is, or perhaps they don't know it. Now, in that instance, there are ways that you can find out someone's name. Not everyone's name, and I'll give you a great case in point. At the W Hotel, I get out of the car, the porter grabs my bag out of the taxi, he walks around, opens my door, and we walk in. He says, "Mr. Illman, welcome to the W." And I thought, well, that's very clever, because I've never stayed here before, and I wanted to ask him, but I didn't until we got up to the counter, and it got the better of me, and I said, "How did you know my name?" And he pointed down to the suitcase label, and he could see Illman on sticker. I think it was on the airline tag. And I thought, well, that's very clever. He's made an effort, he's engaged me, and it worked a treat for him. But if you want to connect with someone, use the customer's name. But don't overdo it, because you can sound insincere. Sophie.
Now, a lot of salespeople fear rejection, don't they?
Well, they're terrified of it. And frankly, it stops a lot of people going into sales. But I love the selling profession because the financial rewards are open-ended. And there's a real thrill you get from making a sale that you don't get if you're an accountant in a business, or perhaps you're a cleaner or a receptionist. Good salespeople will never be out of work. And that's why I love the whole profession, and I'm happy to help people get better, whether they're in person or selling over the phone.
Is speed important when selling?
Oh, it's critical. It'll put you in front of your competition or behind. It is a real differentiator. And I remember when we first started, when there was no internet, a client would ring in and they'd say, "Oh, look, I'm interested in messages on hold." So in order to impress them and be quick, I'd have one of my support staff ring the company, find out the fax number for the division that that person is working in, and then we'd send a fax while we're talking to the person on the phone. And I would say at some point, "Do you want to pop me on hold and go and grab that fax?" And they go, "Okay, yeah, my number's 03." I've done that already. And it used to wow them. Today, we don't have that problem with the fax, because we don't fax anyone. But we'll do things like a demonstration, because we sell audio production in messages on hold. And that person will ring in and they'll tell us a bit about their business, and they don't know that one of our staff is writing a demo as they speak. And they're taking their words, they're turning it into a demonstration audio production. We're recording it, and we're recording it and playing it to them down the line within 10 minutes. So on that very first sales call, they're hearing what this thing could sound like. And it's because of that critical turnaround, that quick turnaround, that these people think, wow, you are responsive. I can tell them all day long that we're responsive. Far better, I show them. And you would have had it too when you rung suppliers and perhaps rung 3 or 4 for a quote, and you'll get a straggler a couple of days later come back to you. And it's bizarre and crazy that all the marketing they've done to get you to a point where you've contacted that company is wasted because they've taken 2 days. Chances are in 2 days you've done something else, gone with another supplier, or perhaps that idea has just fallen by the wayside, and what was important 2 days ago is now not important. But certainly investing in ways to speed sales or service pays real dividends.
Now, you're an avid fan of the movie Boiler Room.
Have you seen it?
No, I have not seen it.
Well, if you were selling, you'd want to watch it. It is a fantastic movie about telephone sales. Now, granted, the salespeople are selling a shonky product, but they are passionate and they are highly persuasive. And there's one great line in there that rings very true with me. It says, "On every call you make, a sale is made. Either you sell the person some stock or they sell you on a reason why they can't buy. Either way, a sale is made." And it is so true.
Does selling over the phone differ from selling face-to-face?
It does. Face-to-face, you get this marvellous interaction. I can see your facial expression, I can see your hands move, and I get far more read on you. Over the phone, you really only get tone and words. It's a bit like radio. Radio is a theatre of the mind. Television, it's just all out in front of you. So yes, it is a little bit more difficult to do, but you can connect if you listen. You've got to sound enthusiastic, got to have a smile in your voice. I always tell my crew here that you have to get out of your chair. If you're going to sound enthusiastic on the phone, and we give them headsets, get up and start walking around, because it's a whole lot easier to be animated and excited if you're walking around as opposed to sitting at your desk. And a lot of people used to say to us when we started, oh, you won't be able to sell into the eastern states because you have to go and see them. Well, that's rubbish. We sell all of our business on the phone. We hardly see anyone these days, even if they're down the road from us. They don't need to see us. Half the time they don't even want to see us. So there's definitely a way that you can turn telesales into a very positive and brilliant way of selling.
So it sounds like you don't really sell face-to-face at all anymore.
Face-to-face selling is very expensive, but the plus is you can make this marvellous connection, but you're limited by geography and by time. On the other hand, the internet and social media gives you that massive reach, but very hard to connect personally. Whereas the phone sales side of things is your middle ground. It's economical, you can establish bonds and connection with customers, and when it's done right, there are great rewards.
Do you think salespeople use email effectively?
Yes and no. I think a lot of people hide behind it, particularly timid people or young staff. We get a lot of young people come into our organisation and they've spent 10 years just texting people and they think, great, I'm frightened of talking to them. But oftentimes it's quicker to pick up the phone and call somebody. With an email conversation, it could last days. You email me, I spend a day looking at it, 2 hours you spend with it, I spend another couple of hours, whereas I can just pick up the phone, get onto someone, maybe get an answer and an order straight away. The other thing when you get on the phone and start selling is you can learn quite a lot. Accent, where are they from? Age, that'll affect the way you sell to them perhaps. Mood, are they happy? Are they angry? You can fine-tune what you do in a sales situation by taking that information. And if your competitors aren't making that effort, you're in front.
So what advice would you give to a salesperson who maybe is clinging to email a little bit too much?
Stop it. Stop it. And I have the same problem with my staff. That staff member will email that staff member and they're 4 offices away, and it takes way longer to type an email than it does to actually get on the telephone. So just go and immerse yourself in it. You're not going to die.
When you first started selling, how did you get past gatekeepers, so your receptionists and your PAs to decision makers?
Oh, it used to kill me in the early years. I had no idea when I was told, oh, look, just leave your name and I'll get him to call you back. They're never going to call me back. They didn't want to be sold to. But over the years, I've got very clever at it, and I'll give you one tip straight away. You ring early in the day if they're an early starter, you ring late in the day if they're a late starter, or you find out what time the receptionist goes to lunch or the PA, and you ring then. You actually get around them that way. But in the skills series, I give you 2 great tips. You need to be a little bit cheeky and a bit of an actor, but you will end up with either their direct phone number in the office, or if you're really lucky, their mobile number. Once you get those details, bang, you're away.
When you do get through to the decision maker, what do you say?
Oh, I don't start with how are you today. How are you today is a lackluster, lame opening line that screams telemarketer. And I get so many people, I get probably 4 or 5 calls a week where they open with that same lame line. What should you say? I think it needs to be very quick and to the point. What is the benefit of the call? And you need to be eloquent in your speaking and present a benefit. Now, the more you know about that person, the more tailored you can make that remark. But it will never be the same for everyone, or it shouldn't be.
Do you have any tips for people starting out in business, trying to present their product maybe a little differently to their competition?
When I first started, we used to sell a cassette player for $169 and an audio production. And I thought that was the way to sell that product. And I'd go out and I'd sell someone on that, and then 3 months later I'd go back and sell them on another audio production. And I had to keep going back. And then I went to America and I met some guys over there and they said, are you bundling? What do you mean? Are you putting a package together and you're going out there and selling them? Why don't you sell them on a package instead of just one production every 3 months and have to sell that again? I thought, that's a great idea. Doesn't cost me any extra time. So that's where we came to rely on packaging our product in a different way. And I think telecommunication companies have done this marvellous job of hiding the cost of a call. I don't know what it costs to ring another state. All I know is I'm on this package and that I virtually view these calls as free of charge, although I know I'm paying a monthly fee. But when you can package things like that and change the way that you present your product, that's a very powerful thing. And so I would always suggest to a business, is there a way that you can change the way you package your product or services and be more effective?
In Canity, you talk about the feel, felt, found principle. So how does it work?
Okay, let's say you go into a hi-fi store and you want to buy a hi-fi system. You get a little bit confused and you say, oh, look, it looks too difficult to program, I'll give it a miss. If that was me selling to you, I'd be saying, I understand you feel that way. I had a client last week who felt the same way. What they did was, bought the thing, went home, watched a YouTube video, had it up and running within a few minutes. So you empathise with the client. You say, I understand you feel that way. You let them know that they're not the only people to have thought that by saying, I had a client last week that had the same thing. And then you say that this is what they found. So it's a bit like storytelling.
A lot of sales go walking because of price. Does it always get down to the money?
It does a lot. And I don't think there's a salesperson on earth who hasn't heard it costs too much. But there are ways around the price objection. I think it's important to establish first up if price is the only issue. And the question you'd ask there is, if it was free, would you take it? If the person says, yeah, I'd take it if it was free, well, then you know it is the price. But then you want to get away from price because price is not the primary factor. You've got to perhaps come along the lines of, so if you could see value in it, could we do business? Value and price are different things. And I think it's very important that you get back to the value proposition. Once you get from that person that is the price and that's the only thing, if you can overcome it, you've got a sale.
So how do you respond if someone asks for a discount?
Well, a lot of people in business just capitulate. Weak salespeople will just give away any margin that they're allowed to give away. There are ways to offer a discount where the customer will actually pay full price. And I'll give you an example. If a competitor perhaps has it at half price and someone says to you, look, I can get that for half price down at Joe Bloggs. If you know your competitor and you come back and say, oh, I misunderstood you, I thought you wanted feature A and B. Oh, I do. But you said Joe Bloggs is offering you the XYZ at half price? Yeah. Well, that hasn't got A and B. Oh. And do you want this and that? Yes. Well, that hasn't got this and that. Oftentimes, the customer is just bamboozled by price. They forget to ask the right questions. So if you know what your competitors are up to, you can get around that price situation there. And they will come back to you and pay full price. But the best salespeople will not need to discount. They will be confident in their product, they'll know it intimately, and they'll importantly know what the competition are doing.
Now, speaking about the competition, how much attention should you be paying them?
If you're only dealing in price, you've got to be critically aware of what they're doing. However, in my business, I've never really worried about what the competition's doing. I've had a finger on the pulse and I understand what their packages involve, but I certainly don't get preoccupied with them.
A lot of what you've included in the Canity series has come about from your experience as a customer, is that right?
Oh yeah, I'm passionate about customer service, and I think what I talk about a lot in my business and in this training are simple, small things that I pick up when I'm out and about, because it's the little things that'll make or break you. And I'll give you an example, and this one I hate when I'm perhaps second or third in a queue and I'll be standing behind someone who's being served at a counter and the staff member will look up and glance at me and look straight down and they won't welcome me. And I think, how crazy is that? Because I'm not then obligated to stay. If I think, oh, I've waited too long, I can just get up and walk out. The very clever thing to do is to welcome them. Hi, I'll be with you in just a moment. Then I'm sort of rooted to that spot. I've got to stay there, otherwise I'm going to look a bit rude. But certainly I revel in the greatest customer service that I find, and I make sure I pat them on the back and tell their bosses importantly. And just as much when I find something that's cringeworthy, I'll bring it to an owner's attention or a manager's attention. I think you owe it to a business to do that. I know that if my staff weren't doing the right thing, I'd want to know. And I don't blame the staff, I blame management for not training their people.
Now, Kym, I hear you're a stickler for language. How can language affect the sales process?
If you only deal with idiots, you can say whatever you want. You'll be on the same level at worst. But I think language sets you apart in a sales situation. Do you have a crutch word?
Like,
There you go. A lot of people have like, basically, and it's a word that will creep into your vocabulary, and you won't even know you're saying it. And I know with our staff here that I'm always keen to point out if they're becoming dependent on it, because it makes you sound insignificant. So that's one important thing, a crutch word. I'll try and get someone to call you back. Get rid of the try. Because if you try and you fail, you can say to the person, hey, I tried. I did exactly what I said. You take out that word and you say, I will get someone to call you back, and you are judged on what actually happens. I'm just calling. You don't need the just. Just diminishes whatever you say. Whatever comes after just is not important. And I urge anyone in business to speak positively. I don't know how many times when I'll ask a salesperson, have you got it in red? No. And that's it. That's where the conversation ends. And I think it's important that if you haven't got it in red, you come back and say, look, I don't have red, but I got it red, white, blue and green. Or if you're prepared to wait 2 weeks, I'll make sure I get you a red one and send it out to you. So yes, language is vital.
I know a lot of frontline staff are dealing with angry customers and sometimes they struggle. Do you have any advice for dealing with that typical angry customer?
When we first released Phone Skills, we got a lot of inquiries from people saying, hey, we love the couple of segments you've got on handling angry customers, but we need more. It is the number one bugbear, I think, amongst particularly young and timid staff when they get some customer coming in and just overpowering them. And a lot of these customers come in expecting a fight. They think, I'm not going to get any joy out of this, so I've got to be cranky. A couple of things. For one, don't take it personally. It's not about you, it's the customer. You've got to get on the same side of the table with them. That's the important thing, where you move around the same side of the table as them and look at it from their point of view, empathise with them. And let's say you've got a 7-day return policy and they come in on day 14. Don't go waving your finger, oh, that's 7 days out, you can't get your money back. At the very least, sit down with them, understand their situation, and perhaps say, look, let's go and have a chat with my manager. I understand where you're coming from. I'll see what I can do for you. If you act as their friend and their ally, you'll get a much better response. But I go into a whole lot more of these great tactics because it's really hard work when you're on that front line. And especially if you're getting bombarded with angry customers, you need some sort of help.
I'm interested in your philosophy on the word sorry.
Oh, it's a shocking word. You should never say sorry to anyone. I'll tell you why, because it says how you feel. And quite frankly, the client doesn't care how I feel. If I say, oh, I'm sorry about that, big deal. There are better ways that you can seek the client's forgiveness and ask for an apology, and it's not by saying sorry, and I go into some detail about that. And when you learn the secret, you're a far more effective salesperson and customer service person.
Kym, a lot of businesses provide their staff with very little training.
You're telling me, it's a crime. And I know why. It's because managers and owners are too busy. They think this is too time consuming, it's too hard, I'm going to have to lose staff out of the office for hours, it's going to cost me a fortune. And they end up saying, look, I'll just assume that you know what's going on and hope for the best. Now, I really don't think you can afford to be doing that in business. But sales skills is not just for sales staff. And I know a lot of businesses think, oh, let's just train our sales staff to sell. I think you've got to have everyone in your organisation with a little bit of knowledge on how to sell. Everyone should be thinking about sales. The hotel porter who's standing in a lift and a couple gets in and the husband says to the wife, oh, look, I'm not feeling too well, I might go to bed. If that hotel porter is switched on and can say, would you like me to get some chicken soup sent up to your room? How good's that? They've made a sale by simply eavesdropping, admittedly, but paying attention and knowing what's going on. I have a good friend of mine that works in an insurance brokerage. He's an accountant. And every time I catch up with him, I might say, oh, look, I bought a new Bose system for the lounge room last week. He'll say, do you want me to put that on your policy? Because I've got an individual item policy. And I think, he doesn't have to do that. But he's doing, in his own way, a little bit to help the company. Because as you have more things that you need to insure, your premiums go up. So I think there's a place for every person in an organisation to know a little bit about selling.
Now, you mentioned eavesdropping there. I'm taking that as it's okay to take risks sometimes.
Oh, yeah. And look, every now and then you're going to come adrift. But most people would be impressed if I was in that situation and I was that male and I was offered some chicken soup, I'd be tickled pink that somebody took an interest in me rather than just stood there stoic and stony-faced in the lift. So yeah, take a risk. What's the worst that can happen?
It's widely agreed that first impressions are vital in business, but what can staff actually do to get those first impressions nailed?
Look, in person and on the phone, smile. It's the simplest thing. It's such a powerful thing when you see someone smile, but you can also hear a smile. And running an audio production business, I know that if I'm not smiling and have this big grin on my face, I can't sound happy. That is a no-brainer. When you do meet someone in a retail environment, don't ask, can I help you? Or are you right there? Engage them. If you see them perhaps carrying a book, instead of saying, are you right there, or can I help you, say, what are you reading? Engage the customer. If you see them get out of a Holden or a BMW, say, is that the new XYZ car? Yes, it is. I just got it last week. Because it's very hard, and as you know, people when they're out shopping don't want to be interrupted, just browsing things. But if you make an effort and you interact with them, it's very hard for them to be that standoffish. On the phone, we mentioned, don't start with how are you today. Make an impression. Do something special. If you know a bit of information about that person, use that information. These things aren't rocket science. And when somebody asks you, how are you today, the boring start, don't be good, thanks, and you. Be anything but. Be sensational. Whatever it is, come out of your shell and inject a bit of personality.
Can you tell me a bit more about injecting personality and how important it is to any sales process?
I think people are told in business, look, you've got to be straight up and down the line. And everyone's straight up and down the line. If you're going to be a little bit different, you get this opportunity to stand out. And I think you should revel in it. I've always done things a little bit different with my entrepreneurial spirit. And I'm not frightened to go out on a limb. And every now and then I will get it wrong. But 99% of the time, people like the fact that you're a little bit different. And don't be frightened of it. You will be remembered.
Kym, where did the idea for Canity come from?
The idea, I get asked quite a lot to do seminars and speaking tours, and I do a few of them, but they tend to be quite time-consuming and rather costly. And then one day I was recording something in our studio, and it was some audio for a business to help their staff understand their new branding. And they were going to put it with a video, play it to their staff, and I thought, hey, I could do this for my staff with phone training and email skills and all that sort of stuff. And then I thought, hang on, if I'm going to do it for our staff, let's do it for everyone. And I decided I would start the business, and I did phone skills first. And I thought it's a great opportunity for us to be innovative and diverse and combines audio and video, two things that we're great at, into this one complete training solution. And that's Canity.
Kym, thanks so much for sharing your strategies with us today. It's good to know that there are still people out there passionate about delivering 5-star service. I wish you all the best of luck.
Oh, it's been a thrill, Sophie. Thank you.